quick overview of who I am and our company. Weston & Sampson, we're a multidisciplinary firm, over 700 professionals all up and down the East Coast. In our Albany office, we have engineers, landscape architects, environmental scientists, construction inspectors, and again, we do a wide range of projects, including many in the city of Albany. So the project goal here primarily is to improve Manning Boulevard and improve the drainage and the pedestrian infrastructure along that whole corridor. So that's inclusive of the travelways as well as the bridle paths on either side, sidewalks, crossings, kind of the whole big picture of Manning Boulevard. Some key objectives to achieve that goal is to regrade the roadways and the bridle paths within Manning Boulevard and introduce additional stormwater infrastructure and green infrastructure to mitigate some flooding, icing, and ponding that we understand has been an ongoing issue down that road. We're also going to improve the pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure through safety improvements such as ADA accessibility improvements, reconstructing curb ramps to be ADA accessible, introduction of bicycle facilities, be that sharrows or bike route signage, and then also provide some general streetscape improvements through tree plantings, streetscape plantings, improving the vegetated buffers along the corridor, signage, redo the curbing, et cetera, just kind of some general improvements. I think most of you probably live on or near or have at least traveled down Manning Boulevard, but a quick overview of the existing conditions. The right-of-way is approximately 150 feet wide, so that's the public space from basically a little past the edge of each sidewalk. The main roadway is a bi-directional corridor with a turning lane, and that's for the entire length of Manning Boulevard. There are bridle paths on each side. Each one is about 22 feet wide. There's some variability, and they're not striped. They're a little more informal compared to the main travelway. Water currently drains. Like we said, we understand you get some ponding and icing issues, so water is draining towards the residential areas of the corridor. There's limited stormwater infrastructure through catch basins, swales, et cetera, throughout the corridor. Again, that's likely contributing to some of the drainage issues. There is curb in portions of Manning Boulevard. It's inconsistent in height, likely through years of various improvement projects with changes in thickness of pavement. The main roadway generally drains towards the low spot, and that's at the intersection of Lancaster and Manning. That's the lowest point in the corridor. The bridle paths are crowned, actually, so they partially drain towards the green buffer and partially towards the resident properties. Again, that's kind of a general condition. It's not the case in all parts of Manning Boulevard, but generally that's what you see out there. There are a lot of mature trees, very mature trees located in the green buffer spaces adjacent to the sidewalks, in addition to some utilities such as utility poles, hydrants, and the associated underground and overhead utilities. So there's overhead wires, there's underground water, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and those are all beneath the pavement along the corridor. So just a quick overview. This is kind of a section of the existing conditions of Manning Boulevard right now. So you can see there's about the 22 feet on the bridle paths on either side. It drains towards the middle and towards the edges of the right-of-way. The main Manning Boulevard travelway is about 40 feet, and as I mentioned, it's got that turning lane and the bidirectional traffic condition, and that's the entire length of the corridor. So this project is in the early stages. We're just working through the concept development, and we have two different concepts to present to you this evening for review and comment. We're going to get your thoughts on these potential improvements. So concept A here, you can see actually very similar to the condition on South Manning with a middle median dividing two single direction travel lanes. So in this concept, we would introduce that middle buffer space, which would include green infrastructure through either rain gardens or vegetated swales to help convey that stormwater to the additional stormwater infrastructure that would be provided and alleviate some of the drainage concerns. The bridle paths, we would keep around 20 feet or so in width on either side. And you can see the biggest change here with those is that they are one way, so single direction with a dedicated parking area. In addition to some bicycle facility improvements, as I mentioned, be that sharrows or signage, something like that. And then the other key difference on those bridle paths is, as part of this project, we would regrade them so that rather than being crowned and having part of the rainwater draining towards properties, we would regrade it so that it all pitches towards the middle, towards these green infrastructure facilities like the swales and rain gardens and the like. That middle corridor would get new tree plantings down the middle, working around the existing utilities there. And of course, in both of these concepts, we will work to maintain as many of the existing site elements and mature trees as possible. Concept B, similar on the edges, as I mentioned, the bridle paths, one-way bicycle infrastructure, the parking area. The main difference here is rather than having the middle median dividing the two travel lanes, we would essentially compress Manning Boulevard to one-way, or one travel lane in each direction, only widening to that turning lane at the intersections of the bridle paths or roadway intersections and the like. This helps get a larger buffer space between the bridle path and the main travelway, so that it allows for more room for green infrastructure, again, more room for that stormwater to get directed to and infiltrate. In both concepts, one other thing that would be changing is, you can see on the plan, we are currently showing 4 access points to the bridle paths. There's currently 6 along the corridor. So as part of this project, to maximize the amount of green infrastructure, we would be eliminating 2 rather, and providing 4. So that's at either end of the corridor at the intersection of Lancaster, and an additional one about halfway between Lancaster and Western, right there. And again, in both concepts, we would also be doing pedestrian infrastructure improvements, so through signaled or signed dedicated crossings for pedestrians at those intersections to create a little more safer environment, in addition to all the other sidewalk reconstruction, ADA curb ramp reconstruction, and the like. It's kind of just summarizing again those bullet points. So as I mentioned, in both concepts, we are removing the 2 access points to increase the amount of green infrastructure area. We are converting the bridle paths to one direction on each side and regrading them away from the properties, and then the pedestrian infrastructure. The key difference, again, basically between that middle green space, dividing the travel lanes, versus compressing them into 2 lanes and then widening to a turning lane at the intersections. Now, Frank, you want to talk about the schedule as far as public engagement and survey?
Thanks. Hello, everybody. I'm Frank Zeoli. For all that you don't know me, I am the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of General Services. Thank you for everybody for coming out. This project is one that I'm so glad we were able to get to. We tried to do a little bit last year. The plan was to come out and do the bridle path separately at the same time, while the contractors did Manning Boulevard. In-house crews were going to do the bridle paths. Well, when I got a phone call from Ginnie, your representative, and she said, wait a minute, we got to talk. So we had a nice meeting, and we came up with the idea that, wait, there's some more issues here. So as a result of those meetings and everybody being on top of it, here we are with this great project, and I think it's going to come out wonderful. What I want to talk a little bit about is just the schedule, what to expect for everybody, because that's one of the biggest questions we hear when we have these meetings is, when, how, what, how am I going to know, that sort of a thing. So the first thing I want to talk about is you've just heard about 2 great concepts. We want your input. We want you to weigh in on which concepts you'd rather see, okay? So to do that, we've created a page on the city's website under projects. You will see something that's Manning Boulevard page, improvement project. You go in there, it'll have the information on this project. This PowerPoint will be up there with all of the info, so you can take a look at all of the concepts, as well as there will be a survey. It'll be up there for 2 weeks. Is that what we said? 2.5 weeks, something like that. It'll be up, and we ask everybody to weigh in, to take the survey, let us know which options, answer whatever questions are asked. So that'll give us an idea of what the neighborhood and the residents are thinking before final design is, decisions are made. So again, that'll be on the website. I mean, it's also here as well, but that's the direct Survey Monkey. We're going to have it embedded right on the account, right on the website, so you don't have to worry about going there. It'll be on the site. The other thing that will be on there, again, like I said, will be this presentation, so people can look at it again, as well as any other information that comes up as we post of what's going to happen. For example, one of the things we talk about trees in here. Trees are really hot button for people. We talk about trees, but the city arborist, who is a certified arborist, will be taking a look at the entire street and seeing what types of trees will thrive best in the neighborhood, as well as, you know, the ones that will go with the, not just thrive, but will live and we can have some sustainability with, okay? So he'll be doing some sort of a report, and that'll be listed. So whatever trees need to come out, whatever trees he's looking to put in, all of that will be listed on there once we get a little farther into this process. I mean, we're still at the very early stages, as you can see. Final design hasn't been done, but once final design is done, that information will be there. Once the project final design is chosen and we're moving forward, we will then post that on the website of exactly what was decided and when and how, a tentative schedule of the work being done. There will also be on the site, there's already on the site a section where you can ask a question. So if you have any questions, so the next thing people are going to ask is, well, if I have a question about the project, who do I call? There's an email, there's an online form right there on that page. Fill it out, ask your question. It goes to the appropriate project manager for this project. So in this stage, when you're just learning about and you're giving your ideas and you have questions about the concepts, you can do that, as well as once construction starts, we've picked a final design and construction starts. If you've got questions or concerns, that's also a location you'll go for that project. Okay, so it goes specific, and we can take it from there. We're looking for design to happen sometime in the fourth quarter, and then we're looking for construction summer of 2024. So by next year this time, you know, you're going to have a beautiful new street and the neighborhood's going to look phenomenal. So we're excited about the whole process, but if you have any questions along the line, again, that's where you want to go, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. If you have any concerns, again, send the email and somebody will get back to you pretty quickly and they'll answer your questions. Okay? So I think we got questions next, right?
Yep, so
Okay.
that concludes. Guess we can really
So, yeah. So I guess let's talk about questions. Go ahead.
We're starting with questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna come back to you, just because I want to make sure everybody can hear you. Okay?
Okay, you talk about two plans, and both plans have left out any input from the people who live here to begin with. And secondly, convenience is a thought that I don't think this company has had. Now, in terms of the bridle path, one way, why? Two ways works really very well. This is not rejecting, you know, any change at all. But one way means that if you're between, I guess it's Lancaster and Washington, you can only go one way to get out, and if you want a reverse direction, you got to go across 2 lanes of traffic right at Washington Boulevard. That is hazardous, and I really reject this plan that you've put in front of us. Secondly, what I also reject is the cutting out the access route to get onto Manning. Why? You haven't gotten any input about this. And secondly, it is a real inconvenience then not to have an access route if you're between Lancaster and Washington Avenue. If you're between Lancaster and Washington Avenue, the only thing you can do is dart out onto Washington against traffic that's coming along Manning and traffic that's coming along Washington. You got to rethink this plan, and I reject it.
Can I respond? Because I'm Ginnie Farrell, I'm the representative for the area. And
the neighbor?
And I live on Manning. So I just want to say that first and foremost, these are not the only outcomes. Part of this process is to, if you'll just let me finish, then we can, you know, dialogue doesn't necessarily help in these situations. So it's definitely something that input from the neighborhood is a really important thing, and that's why we have the survey. That's why we're starting with this meeting. I agree. We need to have neighborhood input, and most of these guys know how passionate I am about it, so it is very important. One of the big input that they did get was from me about several things. First and foremost was safety and slowing traffic down. So a lot of the choices that were made, they are inconvenient for us. And I absolutely knew that there would be pushback on it, but I asked them to prioritize slowing down traffic because that's when we're making choices, If one way slows down traffic, fewer cutouts, also if you can bring it up, it makes it so that you have fewer turning lanes in the middle, which, so one of the big ways, traffic is one of the hardest things to control because it's just what's happening in a person's mind, and that's really hard to control. One of the best ways to do that is actually narrowing the road. So the fewer cutouts we have, the more narrow we can make the road, which will, that's studies, there are different studies that show that is some of the best ways to slow down traffic. That doesn't mean that that has to happen, but I will say they weren't doing this in a vacuum. They were doing this with a lot of pressure from me based on a lot of conversations that I've had on the block. So they aren't doing it with zero input. And I can tell you, I've lived on Manning Boulevard for 20 years, and I also spend a lot of time talking to, I know most of the people in this room. So there's been a lot of input on it. And safety is one of the big things that most neighbors are really concerned about. Slowing that traffic down, making it so it's less likely for people to go into the bridle path. So no, we don't have to do these things, but I think it's also something, as we look at these choices, we need to look at them in terms of why those choices were made, and if it's more important for us to have, a narrower road with fewer cutouts, or is it more important to have, the convenience for us? I also agree, coming in and out at the ends is actually very dangerous, and I think that that's an important thing that we do need to incorporate, especially if we're limiting the number of cutouts in and out of the bridle path. We have to make those end parts a lot safer for us to enter and leave traffic, because it's not safe right now. So,
The other thing, if I can add, that we've heard, and again, DGS is not anything to do with traffic, right? But what we've heard too is people use it as a way to cut through. There's traffic on Manning Boulevard. They cut into the bridle path. It's a passing lane, and that's dangerous. And I've got friends who live on the street that say it puts their children in danger. So by getting rid of that, we'll hopefully stop that. So again, I just want to add that because that's come up to DGS before, even though we really don't have a lot to do with the traffic end of things, but
How much of winter weather was taken into account on this? Because the bridle paths right now, being a little wider, sometimes you cannot pass them one or two ways without that extra space because of parking and because the plows just either can't get in or can't get through. The plowing on the road is terrible right now sometimes. And also narrowing the turnoff points. I don't know if you guys are appreciating how much, especially at rush hour, that is going to back up traffic. Instead of going down because there's that middle lane now, it's going to back it all the way down the street in some cases with just how many cars are there on each end, turning on each on the western and the Washington side.
I can speak to the snow plowing because that is DGS's purview. This will improve it. It will, I think, because first of all, when I met with the residents last year when we talked about not paving the bridle path, we're going to do some in-house work to it. I said, I really didn't want them to, unless there was a major issue. And again, we went back to the drawing board, talked to the city engineer. He said there were some issues. So we then put a halt on it, which I'm glad we did because we're in a much better place. But one of the things that we heard was that it was just horrible. It's horrible to plow. The potholes were out of control. A lot of that had to do with the drainage and everything else. With all of this being fixes for that, I think it's going to be much easier to do plowing. You're going to see I think you'll see a better outcome there. So.
I have a question. The two designs, Project A, this says that the, let's see, where is it? Now, I can see. This one says that the carriage path is going to be 16 feet. Project B says the planting strip is 20 feet. Now that's 4 feet. And if the carriage path is narrowed, that's going to make plowing that much more difficult.
Sorry, the carriage path is actually, this is the carriage path here. That one's 20 feet. The 16-foot area is the drive lane for Manning Boulevard. So you'd have a 16-foot drive lane, about a 12-foot wide planting strip, and then another 16-foot drive lane. That's the main travel way of Manning. The carriage paths would remain 20. Yes. And just one thing, just kind of generally as we're talking here, keep in mind, as has been mentioned, this is very early. Again, these are just the first initial passes. It's some thoughts, and the purpose of this meeting and presenting these is to give everybody a chance to voice your concerns and your opinions, and give us comment and let us know what you think. And the final design will take all that into account. And I just wanted to emphasize these are by no means final. This is just a first pass. So, did you want to handle?
Yeah.
Two questions. Are you addressing the sidewalks, and are you putting in curbs?
We are. I don't know if the microphone's necessary, but just in
You want
case.
to talk loud? Just talk louder.
We are addressing sidewalks, so we've explored the corridor. We're currently, again, this is early concept, but we're identifying the areas where sidewalk will need to be removed and replaced, be that to address drainage, make it ADA compliant, again, kind of tie into the curb ramp and blend the revised grades as necessary. So we are considering sidewalk along the entire corridor. And I'm sorry, curbing was the second question. And yes, we are proposing curbing along the main travelways of Manning Boulevard, again, as a deterrent for cars to skip the curb. We're currently not proposing curbs on the bridle paths. I recall hearing, earlier there was some concerns about plowing and how the curb may help contain that. Our reason for not showing it right now was to encourage as much runoff as possible to get from the bridle path to the green infrastructure. So that was the thought.
One of the reasons we're doing the microphone is because we want the camera to pick it up. We're going to put this on the website so that people who weren't here can see all the questions and hear all the questions.
Hi. This gentleman had a concern about left turns, and I looked at the tiny print on the signs here, and it looks like you're retaining the left turn lanes once you get to the intersections of Washington and Western. Am I right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Does that address your concern?
Well, no, but for how far back? Because at rush hour, that middle lane goes back, but traffic on Manning Boulevard still goes straight. If you cut that back to a finite amount instead of the whole street, suddenly you've got cars that are in the main lane waiting to turn, and traffic backs up farther.
So we've been in discussions with the city traffic engineer as far as, and he will help us coordinate, through traffic studies, how far back that turning lane needs to go to safely accommodate the roadway. So, again, the lengths here these may be a little short compared to what ends up being in the final design. That's a detail that will be worked out, as I said, in coordination with the traffic engineer to make sure that it alleviates that backup.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I have an overall concern beyond traffic, and that's with the drainage. It's really important, and I'm glad that the arborists will be working on the trees to make sure that if some have to go, they'll be replaced with decent trees. But also, what I've observed over the years, I live on North Pine near Lancaster, and there's a lot of apartment buildings springing up in some of the bigger houses, and the owners are putting, are covering the backyards with macadam and taking the trees down, and that's going to affect the water runoff. Also, it doesn't give us any opportunity to have a well-forested city. So I think we need to fight against that decline, and also take a look at. There's a number of old wells up and down Manning Boulevard. I don't know if people are aware of that. They used to have a permit system to have wells. I know there's one a few doors down from mine too. So the water table is actually pretty high. So that might be something to look into, whether or not that affects the drainage. And finally, I want to make sure that we've looked into whether National Grid has already upgraded all the gas lines so that they're not tearing the road up after it's fixed, as well as the possibility of of setting up geothermal connections. Well, while you're doing construction, it might be a good time to drill down 300 or 400 feet so the neighbors could convert from gas to geothermal heating as a district, which I think is going to become increasingly popular in the future. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Benjamin McCrell. I live at 109 Manning Boulevard. That reminded me of a conversation, and certainly I believe we have had someone here from National Grid earlier, but I did hear from Albany Water when I first moved in only 2 years ago that there's a 16-inch natural gas line, and you didn't mention it, and I was just like, maybe I should say it out loud so we don't all explode someday and I'll regret that. That's not necessarily my actual concern at the moment, but I thought I would mention that very briefly. I am, father to one of the young kids growing up on Manning Boulevard, and I'm hoping as she sheds her training wheels and gets a little more daring, that we look to make sure that these bridle paths are either some of the best protected roadways in the city of Albany, or we reconsider what we're doing with this 150-foot right-of-way and see if we can't sneak in 8 feet of a protected bike lane somewhere. It feels a little bit wasteful to plant grass and call that green when we know that DGS does a great job. They're out there every week mowing, using thousands of gallons of fuel every summer. When we could put down a permeable greenway that allows not just ourselves, but also our neighbors to get through this neighborhood a lot quicker, a lot safer, and frankly to make it a recreational destination, which is historically what Manning Boulevard is supposed to be. Bridle paths are for your rich muckety mucks to go out and get their jollies speeding along the side roads. Exactly. So that would be my main concern, is that I feel like all of these are massive improvements over what we have now. Don't get me wrong, this looks great, but we can do better. We can design not just the perfect roadway for 10 years ago, but the perfect roadway for 10 years from now. I would also point out that in that vein of 10 years ago, 2009 City Bike Study suggested a shared roadway, but by the time we got to 2020, 2019, the city suggested a protected roadway. So we are failing that bike plan currently. I believe I had one other point. Sorry to hog the mic. I apologize. The road width. We're definitely moving in the right direction on that. The current main roadway, the lanes are 14 feet wide, which has got to be as wide as or wider than the Northway, which is why we see folks going 45 miles an hour down there and using the center lane to bypass, to zip on past people. So again, all of this is improvement. We're looking at 12, 13-foot lanes. That, however, still misses the mark on currently recommended roadway widths for in-city driving, which caps out on main roadways at typically 11 feet. That's according to the NACTO guidelines. And looking again at these 12-foot roadways, plus you have that little bit of paint on the either side, really expands it to probably about 16-foot roadways. What I'm seeing here is that we're creating a better racing surface currently than what we have right now with our crummy potholes and things like that. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, who's next?
I live at 130 Manning. It's on the north end of Washington Avenue end. And I want to put a word in favor of curbs for the carriage path or the bridle path. We have a number of apartment buildings in that end, and there's a parking issue with respect to, I think there are 4 units in 3 buildings, and a lot of renters have cars. And what they do when they can't find a parking place is they park on the green area. And I know there have been a number of complaints on C-Click Fix about that issue, and the police haven't done much to address it. Plus, there's a number of people who are pretty close to my living room in terms of where they're parking on the grass in front of my house, so I naturally, selfishly would like that fixed.
Why, you don't want people to come inside and have a cup of coffee? All right. Yeah.
Good evening. I live at 112 you're going to present an interesting challenge to me to get into my house when it all becomes one way, because I'll have to go out to Washington Avenue to come down. If I come from Western Avenue, you're going to force me to go all the way up and sit in the traffic and go around. Right now, I go past my house, I use the little access road, and I come back down. I've always viewed these as actually one way, and for decades, the 40 years I've been here, they basically are treated that way. Yes, people come the other direction, but you have to move apart because two cars can't pass one another. So somebody's got to back up, go into a driveway, something's got to happen. But that aside, I'm interested in, there were two things that kind of seem to go by fairly quickly. We've talked about for most of the 40 years that I've been here that it would be really nice to bury the utilities. Utilities were, you just went right by it. Is there anything in the plan to think about burying all the wires? Okay, so you're, if I understood it, you're going to replace some sidewalk, not necessarily all sidewalk, so that would take the utilities away. Then a question for Mr. Zeoli, if I may. I love the idea of more green. Yes, I realize there's some downsides to it, but we do need more forest around here. When the forester does the plan, is the idea that he's thinking to find the tree that should be planted everywhere? Back in the old days, they were honey locust. So what they did is they made a canopy from both sides of the street. It was an astounding view. And so now we have kind of an odd lot of whatever happens to be around gets planted, and it works or it doesn't work. I have a street tree that drops sap. I can't park under the tree for 4 or 5 months a year because of the syrup it puts all over my car. So are we going to go back to that bit of elegance?
So that was the model in a lot of the city, and that is why we've lost 40% of the trees in the city recently to the emerald ash borer disease. So what they're doing now, what Jay Levine, our city arborist, is one of a kind, and he comes with a lot of experience. And what he's done is he's come up with a tree plan. We recently did an inventory of every tree in the city, as well as all the trees that we could put in. And so we're applying for grants and getting money everywhere. The administration's putting more money than we've ever done into plantings, and you're going to see more trees being planted in the future. But one of the things he's tasked with doing is coming up with a plan of what are the right trees in the right areas, and not having the same tree. As beautiful as that is, if they were all ash trees, your entire street would have been empty because they feed and they give each other these diseases. I can speak to that at that level. Jay could give you a lot more and go into detail. As we move and the discussion is being done as part of what trees are going in, we'll make sure that there's some sort of an opportunity for, I'm going to lay that out for him and say that this is something that was brought up, so he might be able to answer that, right? And we can put that in some sort of a comment on the site so people will know, we did look at this, we looked at this, and this is why. One of the things that his reports for all of these projects is doing is laying out why trees are going in what spot and why he feels these are the best trees. So there's a little more information given to you that I think wasn't given in the past about why these trees were chosen. So I promise that will be a part of this. Okay.
Just a quick question. So is there a commitment by the city that this project is going to get done in some capacity by next year? So it's a done deal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, it was it was a done deal that this was going to happen last year. If it wasn't, because again, we listened to the neighbors. So make that clear, is that we're here all because we were told by the neighbors there were a lot of issues. And when you brought it to our attention, we then acted. And here we are. So yeah, you definitely will see something done next year. Okay.
Hi, I have 2 questions. First one, we're all looking at having 100-year-old houses with drainage, or actually our sewers going into our houses are roughly 100 years old for most of us. And I know that when they have done work before, we've had problems with backups of sewer problems and like that in our basements and like that. I'm concerned that that's going to happen again. Is anyone taking into consideration the drainage? You're talking street drainage. Are you talking about the municipal drainage that goes on the sidewalk, the house side of the sidewalks? Is that going to be replaced as well? That's question one.
I want him to answer it on the thing. So you got people that are going to watch the video after the fact. I want them to be able to hear your question and then the answer.
Yep. So the limits of this project are primarily within the right-of-way. Now, that being said, I think a lot of just from looking at, we've done a site survey, so we've been able to see exactly how the topography of that corridor works out. As I mentioned, we'd found that the carriage paths are pitched towards, some of the driveway aprons are actually negatively pitched towards your houses. Some of the sidewalk is negatively pitched towards your houses. So again, with the caveat, this is all very early, our approach right now is essentially holding that back edge of sidewalk and regrading the whole corridor. So everything from there goes towards the green infrastructure that's going to be put in the middle. Now, obviously, the pavement is going to have a lot more runoff than your lawn. Your lawn has some infiltration capacity. So by eliminating a lot of the pavement runoff that's hitting your property, I think that will alleviate, again, the goal is to alleviate some of that problem. But as far as the limits of work, right now that's generally contained within the right-of-way of the...
So the sewer pipes are not planned to be replaced, even though they're over 100 years old?
The sanitary sewer?
Yes.
That is outside the scope of the current project.
So you're going to have to dig up the sidewalks, your new sidewalks, to get to that.
Okay. So let me just say this. There's a couple things to mention here. You're talking about the sewers that are in the street, and then you're talking about issues that you're having in your house, which are from the median into your home. There's a couple of things, and again, without knowing specifics of what the issues are and why that water is coming into your home, there is a program that the water department has now, right? It's part of, I know that it's part of they have a backflow valve grant. They also have one for lead services for that too. There's money available, right? So, but those two things are available. That's before we did contract 1 and 2, which are the other street stuff that happened in the city, not to this level of detail, this type of a project. We sent out letters ahead of that with the water department, worked with the water department to put that out so that we made it available saying, listen, your street's going to get dug up. We're going to do this type of work in the street, the lead services replacement. But we're also offering you this if you want to do it from the street to your home, which is your responsibility. If you need money to do that, there's a grant, okay? So what I think we will do here, I think the best way to do it is your question is now on the record. We're going to refer that to the water department to see what they might do in anticipation of this project. You want to?
I just wanted to follow up that, so part of, and this is after years of going through where we would replace a street and then the water department would go in and like, now they really do a great job with working with the water department and National Grid. When I know that National Grid doesn't always play nice with others. Ray had to go to a county meeting, but so I know there have been hiccups with that. But with the water department, it's actually been really great because I am very involved in the budget process. And it's actually something that we've been able to kind of look at, like this street, we know that we need to replace these parts of it, but the water department will say, oh, we actually have to replace these infrastructure things, so we'll hold off on it. So there's yeah, it's not perfect, and so I don't want to come off like there are never hiccups, and then we get all sorts of hiccups, because hiccups absolutely happen. But for example, in Winthrop, the water department went through and did a whole bunch of work before they went in and put the roadway in, so that it was something where they didn't, we didn't just replace Winthrop and then they're like, oh, actually, we need to replace these things. So there's really active coordination for that. So ideally that won't happen. Could something still happen? Absolutely. But I think that would be something that would be more of a surprise than an actual something that they knew was coming down the pipeline.
We have done, I'm coming. We have done that in the past where we coordinate before any project is scheduled with them, but we have had issues where, like you said, there's that hiccup that'll come up, or we've paved a road and a week later there was a water break. You can't control that,
Fortunately or unfortunately, we have a lot of long memories on our street. In 1990, the mayor and Steve McCardle promised us curbing. that's a long time to wait. And we are still waiting because that curbing improves the plowing because you don't get the ruts and the damage done every single winter that causes the flooding and walking on ice and all the troubles. So we've waited a very long time for a complete project to be done. I'd like it to be done in a successful fashion, certainly. But curbing should be for everything, not just replacing what's there.
We'll take that into consideration. Okay.
Hello, my name is Chester, and I live on 275 Manning Boulevard, just the next block over. I agree this is a big improvement over what is currently on this block, but I wanted to reiterate the need for safety improvements. My girlfriend and I share a car. That's all we can afford at the moment, so I bike a lot. Bike to get to the CVS on Madison to get my medicines and things like that. Bike to work. And there have been, in the last 3 years, half a dozen road deaths within 5 minutes of my house. 2 just on Manning Boulevard, the next block over. I can see from my front door. I saw one of them. It's not safe, and the city committed in the bicycle pedestrian master plan to make this a protected bikeway. I think that's really important. They said they were going to do that by 2030. If it's not in this plan, I don't see that happening. So I think at least one of these concepts, and the city should really look more closely at doing that now. I think it's necessary, and I think it's important.
Okay. We're just going to keep going here. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm very happy that you're going to put a greenway, or whatever it's referred to as, in the center, because it will cut down on the passing. But it seems the only restrictions on traffic are in the bridle path. There's no restriction on traffic on Manning Boulevard where cars can be going 60, 70 miles an hour any given time of the day. How about leaving the entrances and putting in a series of 4-way stops down Manning Boulevard, which would slow traffic down? I'm personally, other than my neighbors, don't care about anybody that commutes across Manning, whether they're going to one of the hospitals or whether they're going to the others. I care about the people who live on Manning. Doesn't faze me if someone's got to stop a couple times going down Manning. There's no restriction on traffic.
Okay.
With all due respect, I really don't think the city is all that interested in traffic safety. I mean, we need to have the crosswalks in this city painted. That would improve traffic safety immensely. This whole neighborhood has invisible crosswalks, literally. That will slow traffic down because drivers will see that there's an actual crosswalk there, and it makes it a lot safer for people who are walking or riding in a wheelchair. Well, hopefully it will. With a stop sign.
Thanks. There's a lot that could be said about these plans, and I think the community's done a really great job already. And I think I just want to echo some of the comments about the one-ways. I'm a little confused as to what the intention is on the bridle paths. There are a lot of shared roadways where traffic can go 2 ways. It can be very narrow, and then that informal dance that one of the neighbors mentioned already can happen naturally, and that tends to slow traffic down there and without inconveniencing people unnecessarily. I also just want to echo the needs for a protected bikeway. Seems pretty obvious here, and then looking at the connections to Washington and Western, it's not really clear to me how a cyclist would have to navigate that intersection. I do see it looks like maybe concrete sidewalk over there, maybe like a 5-foot sidewalk. A little hard to tell from the plan, but making actual gateway connections so that people could seamlessly get from Western and Washington onto Manning would be really good. And then just echoing the comments about paint. We know paint wears off. We had a big shortage during the pandemic of roadway paint. We couldn't repaint things. So that 12-foot lane, which is already too wide to have in a city, looking at NACTO and looking at ASHTO, it turns into a 16-foot lane, which we know people are going to be going 30, 45, 50 miles an hour. I know this gentleman mentioned the need for stop controls. It doesn't need to be a stop control, obviously. It could be a speed control. You could have a speed hump there or a raised crosswalk. Those things don't wear away as quickly, and that would be really great. Thank you.
You good? Okay.
Hello. So I agree with having a bicycle path. I think the bridle path would be great for that. My question is, on South Manning, that greenery strip in the middle, do you know about how wide that is now, that one? Is that 12 feet wide? Okay, because my only concern is that I'm all for more trees, more greenery, but I do think that it can harm sight lines. So from a safety point of view, when I'm driving down South Manning, I feel like a kid could run right out in front of me, anything could happen because you can't see. So one thing I like, and I know it makes people go faster, but I like on this section of Manning, it's wide open. I can see what's coming at me. So sometimes that can be safer than having, trees and greenery everywhere. So just want to put that out there. But yeah, I'm also don't think it needs to be one way. I think everybody kind of respects that. And my concern with eliminating another entry point is it's actually going to cause more traffic on the bridle path because now people are having to do longer routes. And it's just I think it could make everything more congested and even more traffic on the bridle path if you don't have more turning lanes and access points.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Gene and I have always been interested in slowing the traffic down. That 4-lane on Manning went to 3 lanes because we went to the city for, I think, a good 10 years, and we got the turning lane put in. There is a turning lane, but of course, there isn't any painting of anything anywhere in Albany. But I go back, and I worked for the state far too long. And with the state, you're always presented with the final plan, which is what we have, concept A and B, and make some comments if you want. Again, it's not satisfactorily answered at all why the bridle path is being 1 lane is any safer. And as Ms. Fahey conceded, Farrell, conceded, a left turn lane when you're at the Washington end is going to be hazardous beyond belief. So leave the access roads in. And I've got a neighbor here. Cynthia, you want to turn across 3 lanes of traffic to... Yeah, it's convenience and safety, and this plan does not have either.
Okay, thank you.
You said what I was just going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. The one way doesn't. I've lived on Manning for over 20 years, and so I've witnessed on a pretty much daily basis the people who jump into the bridle path to pass someone on the main road, and I don't see that changing at all. What I do think might change things, obviously the stop sign at Lancaster is a good thing, and I worked very hard, and I think, Ginnie, you helped, and a lot of people worked hard to get that stop sign there, and I think that's helped, although we still have the people flying through the stop sign. But and maybe this is something you've considered, the idea of having grooved pavement or speed bumps. I know we've talked about speed bumps at other meetings, and there was the concern about plowing and that the city doesn't want that. But now they're not, I don't know what they're called, the speed dips in the south end.
Bumps to humps.
They're humps.
This way as opposed to going this way.
Okay. Keeping the 2 ways, keeping all the access points, and putting in a few speed humps or whatever you want to call them, or grooved pavement. I mean, there's nothing more satisfying than watching someone's transmission fall off. And I used to see that when the road had lots of potholes, and I would my kids, and we'd look and be like, that car is going to have problems. And then, yep, that was a problem. And then we would, clap and have ice cream. But anyway, just something to consider, because I think like a lot of people here, I really don't, I love the trees, I love the bridle path, but the most important thing in my mind, is the safety, especially the safety of the children, the bicyclists, and the pedestrians. And you know, ideally, the bridle paths are just access for the people who live on the road or on the street. So.
Let me just, if you took away anything from today, again, this is the first step of a very long process, okay? Nothing has been decided here, okay? We've said that more than once. I want to say it again so everybody hears it. This is the beginning of a process, okay?
So I just want to dogpile on the one-way bridle paths because like we live at 135 Manning, so we have an outlet that's just 2 houses down, and then we have the outlet right at the end. And driving the kids to school in the morning, trying to get out, I always go to the one that's to the left because then I can get to the turn lane to get to turn left on Washington. With a one-way bridle path, everyone that lives past Lancaster will almost always in the morning have to get stuck and then be forced to turn right onto Washington and figure out another way to go around because especially with a shortened turn lane, traffic is going to be backed up and it's going to be even harder to get across into the turn lane to turn left. So it just something, and that's going to happen on the other side as well, that after a certain point, it's going to create a lot more headache, which will then back up and cause a lot of probably unanticipated problems. The second question, you said it's step one of a very long process, but we're supposed to start construction next summer. So when are decisions going to actually be made?
As I said a few minutes ago, will you go to that slide, please? So I can show it. Project is fourth quarter, as I said, September to December. Construction, summer of 2024. We're figuring that's when it's going to start. So around this time of year, next year, you're going to see things happening. Maybe it might not get finished till October, but it's going to happen. So when we say this long process, I would say when we do 70 streets in a year, right? I would say that in 1 year getting it done. This started last year. Okay, and then we got to this point, and we're going to have a couple of more points where you're going to see more information. In the beginning, I said, look at the project page. All decisions, things are going to be made, are going to be there. The final design, once everything is decided, again, we're asking for your input. If you don't do the survey, we're not going to be able to. I mean, we took some of your input down here tonight, and obviously there's a theme, and I think we can take it from there. But I want everybody, even if you were here, to do the survey. That's going to put your opinion on the record for us to then be able to make some better decisions. And that's going to drive what the final design looks like. And I think I would expect that maybe we could answer some of those questions too, to say, we chose this design and this is the reason why, okay? And I think that's what people are looking for today. And I'm going to tell you, I'm a lifelong resident, and I'm fourth generation in the city, my family coming here in 1906. So I can tell you in my 26 years with DGS, we've never gone to, did the public comment or the input that we're doing now, and that's because people want it, and that's why we're here, okay? So we're not gonna go to all this to then not listen to you in the first place. That's not gonna happen. That's part of what this is for. Give us your ideas, tell us what you're thinking, fill out the survey. If you have questions or additional thoughts, you can send the email, even if it's just an additional thought that you didn't articulate in the survey. Please, by all means, send us the email. Even if it's not a question, send us the email and tell us what you're thinking, okay? Go ahead.
Do you want to ask a question?
Just really quick. If say we had less green space, so say the bridle paths were wider to incorporate a bicycle path, and we still had more room for turning on Manning, would there still be ways to alleviate the drainage, or are those crucial to that?
So it's a balancing act. The less green space you have, the less chance you have for infiltration. In implementing those strategies, it's not to say they can't get wider. It's just it's a trade-off, right? So, just a couple other things to mention on the carriage path. Obviously, we hear y'all. There's a lot of concerns about the one-way traffic. I just wanted to make a couple points about how we came to that idea for the concept. Again, in conjunction with speaking with different city reps, including the DGS and the traffic department. One big benefit, as was mentioned, was snow plowing. So by having it be one way, you can have a dedicated parking area, which allows you to have alternate parking, makes the snow plowing a little bit easier. So that was one of the rationales that was stated. Another one, just with the the access points, again, our first pass was thinking maybe 2 could come out. That's by no means permanent. We could certainly add more. It's just, as was mentioned, by reducing those and making them one way. The thought was to have it be a little more traffic calming, and reduce, people just darting out into it. And it is a convenience, as a lot of folks have mentioned, there's a convenience factor. So again, it's all about trade-offs, and that's part of the reason why we want your feedback, is to see where those trade-offs should be made. So.
You're talking a speed hump. That's speed humps would not be part of this. No.
So on Manning Boulevard proper, not the bridle paths, we can't have speed humps. That's not. It's just not something that. There's different rules with where you can put them and where you can't. The bridle path is absolutely a possibility to do that. And they are rolling out. It's something that I think as we weigh in, I would definitely mention that, specifically with the bridle path, to say that that's something that we would love to have consider. I'm not sure in terms of cost if that's something that it's cheaper because we're already doing the project or anything like that, but it's certainly something to weigh in on. And the other thing is that just to keep in mind that there's a lot of things that will absolutely change with the feedback. So this is our first meeting. We're likely to have more on this or more information shared. So this is an initial piece. And I will say my big message to them was to really focus on safety and drainage. So a lot of the different things you're seeing as a result of that. And from that, I was like, this is, we live there, and it's important to get people that live there feedback on whether we think this is a good idea, whether we can live with this, whether the trade-offs are worth it. That's something that I think does need a lot of neighborhood input.
Ginny, I had a question. You said that speed humps or bumps are not possible on Manning. Is Bob's suggestion of an additional stop sign or 2 possible?
I don't know, and I was wondering, like, I can check in with traffic engineering, but there's different specific. So like Washington and Western Manning, there's some streets in the city that have like emergency routes, something like that. So they're designated emergency routes. So there are different restrictions for them based on that. So I don't know if we could have stop signs or not on Manning proper. But you can if it's an emergency. So that's the whole thing is when you have emergency. Right. Well, that's the thing is I don't know what the restrictions are, so I don't want to say, yes, that's something that we can do. I don't know. I know that we can't have speed humps, but we might be able to have stop signs, and I think it's worth, I'll ask. I think it's worth checking.
Again,
Right.
that's what you put it on the record, and it's going to be followed up on. That's the whole idea of the public input. You're bringing something up. We got to go back. I'm not the expert. These gentlemen aren't the experts in that. Traffic engineering. Again, we have to yield to the professionals, to the people who are educated in this, and we will definitely do that. So.
There's also in Washington Park, you can hit a button just when you want to cross. For the crosswalk, and it'll flash lights for drivers to slow down because they're crossing. That could be.
Okay, so we'll make sure that we ask that question as well. If there can be a button, a mid-block crossing. So that's something if we can ask, we can see. So, yeah. Okay.
What are we going to do about pedestrian safety on the ends? Crossing Manning on Western or Washington, I can't tell you how many times I've almost been hit, like daily, because people don't follow the crosswalk signs. They don't stop. They keep turning. They'll turn right into you. I can be holding a toddler's hand. I could be dragging a wagon. I could have 5 people in my family with me. They don't stop. They'll just keep going. Like, what are we going to do so I can cross the road without playing Frogger?
Newsflash, they're breaking the law. People are breaking the law. They're not following the rules. Again, we will take that. Do you want to speak to any design that deals with, otherwise that's a question for traffic engineering and, right?
Yeah, so the intersections of, go back to one of the, The intersections at Washington and Western are part of this project. So we are doing pedestrian infrastructure improvements there through reconstructing the curb ramps, restriping the crossings. You know, as far as the specific details at the roadway configuration, that's something, as I mentioned, we could talk with traffic engineering to see what they would accept and what they would allow. Yeah. It's one of those trade-offs, again, where, you know, as you narrow that, though, you're going to, I think there were a couple questions about the queuing length. So it's just how that all plays together.
And that's something that because I walk there several times a day. And I will, it has, so we've gotten over there, like there's been different improvements over the years. It's still an overall issue, and it's an issue throughout the city. So there's a lot of different areas throughout the ward for people. I think we're just having mostly Manning people, but it's an absolute issue, and it's something that, as we're talking about pedestrian infrastructure, it's different in our area versus downtown. So downtown people want this, like, very specific things. I'm like, that's not going to work for us. I want to be able to push a button. I love the bag buttons. I want to be able to push a button and not have any traffic go. Because what we're dealing with is you have a very confusing intersection like Manning and Western, where you're also getting into the, like, South Manning, where it kind of branches off. And yeah, like, people, they're not supposed to turn, and they're going anyway. And so there's an overall, so I think it's an overall issue that we're having a lot of conversations about, because from my perspective, I just want to be able to press the button. And we have too many kids going through, like, you can't watch out for, if I'm looking over my shoulder to see if somebody's going to swoop around and hit me, then I mean, what's a 9-year-old going to do? So it's definitely something, it's bigger than this, and I think we need to, so I'm one of those people, bring it up every time, because it's so important that it's heard, and I appreciate you bringing it up, because it should be considered with this project. But it's also, my request is bring it up every time you can, because it's an overall issue in a lot of other areas in the ward too.
How about how dangerous the Washington intersection is? How many accidents are there?
I mean, it's the same for both of them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say Western is unique to it.
I'm wondering, have you discussed any of these changes with the police department? If they're not giving out tickets and people are going 50 miles an hour, that's not the street's problem. That's the police's problem.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. And, traffic engineering works for the police, so you would hope that, but that's what we try to do. A lot of these infrastructure, these changes are to help mitigate that, to stop people from breaking the law.
You have to work with the police.
Yes, they're a part of this, yes.
Again, on that same point, I would say the opposite. When you have a 16-foot wide roadway, sure, if a cop is there, they're going to stop you. But that's what the actual roadway widths, the infrastructure, tells you how to drive. When you're driving in downtown Albany and there's cobblestones and there's people parked on both sides of the streets, you're not going 50 miles an hour. So the cops can't always be there. We have to design for safe streets. Pushing that out a little bit further, obviously you have the bounds of the project drawn from Western to Washington, including maybe some of it, I'm not sure. I asked this question when we were discussing the Breveter redesign as well. Can we control those intersections? Can these projects extend that little bit further to add repainted sidewalks, to add bike lanes, to maybe get rid of some of the right on red options, unless they're controlled right on reds?
I mean, all of this is being written down. We'll work on it. We will mention it again. Traffic safety will be involved. Traffic engineering will be involved.
Signage, no right on red.
Yep.
I'll buy it.
Yeah. I'll ready to check. Okay.
So I just want to thank the city and Jenny for this. I know people have a lot of concerns. This is a project that has to get done. I commend you for getting the input. And I think we all just have to remember why we're doing this and why it has to be done. So I know, God bless you.
Again, it's important work. We're here to make the neighborhood better any way we can, and I think the public input is helpful, because you live it. We don't necessarily, except for to travel it, we don't know, so that's why it's helpful.
About 15, 20 years ago, there used to be police cars sat right in front of my house. I live near one of the entrances to the bridle path. I'd love to check the statistics. I bet speeding was way down back then. What are our chances of getting that again?
Again, we can pass that along to the police department about how they're going to enforce speeding and that sort of a thing. Again, it wouldn't be part of the project, but we could definitely pass that thought along.
Another change that could really help pedestrian improvements, I know it's at the north end of this block at that intersection, and it's also a lot of intersections throughout the city. You'll notice the sensors to change the traffic lights will extend not just into the crosswalk, but clear across it into the intersection. And some drivers are very aware of that, and they will move forward just so they can try and trigger the light sooner. I don't know if that actually works or not, but it certainly, people think it does, and it encourages people to go onto the crosswalks when they're already not painted and the rest of it, and they can see, oh yeah, it's supposed to detect that I'm there, so I'm going to move forward. If that's something that can reasonably be done, I think that should be done in this project. And I'm not sure if at the either ends, if there's curb extensions into Washington or Western. Those are really wide roads, and I think that'd be the biggest thing you could do is just when the parking sort of lane approaches the intersection, you're not supposed to park near an intersection anyways. If we can make that sort of a curb extension, now you're crossing 4 lanes of Washington Avenue instead of 6, that would be a huge improvement as well. I'm not sure if that's already incorporated or not.
Okay. You guys are really giving me a workout tonight, let me tell you.
Yeah, on a similar note, I think the intersections, realizing now that they're a part of the scope, which was not clear to me earlier, I think there needs to be special consideration on both of those to improve the crossings. You can really see at I think it's the southeast corner of the western intersection with Manning, that skewed diagonal crosswalk increases the crossing distance and the amount of time that pedestrians are vulnerable there. So reducing that crossing distance by making it straighter and narrowing the other side of Manning should be a part of this project. I heard a murmur about the project budget. I mean, we totally get consultants have budgets, but looks like it's part of the scope, and it would be a huge missed opportunity to stop on just the corridor and forget about the intersections.
Well, I just want to say I love everyone's feedback, and I feel like we're a good neighborhood that cares. I just wanted to say for South Manning, for the idea of the greenery in the middle, people still fly down South Manning, and that is narrow, and it has the greenery in the middle. And I think people sometimes drive faster on that than Manning. So I don't know if making it narrower and creating that greenery will stop people from going fast. But I do think at Lancaster, if you had really big signs, yellow with people on them, possibly a stop sign, at least a flashing light, if that halfway point was really prominent, that could cause people to not go as fast. If it's like in their face, the halfway point, a big sign that says slow down, like I would prefer that over greenery in the middle myself. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, South Manning has very wide lanes. They're very wide, yeah. It's because of the trees that they feel narrow, but it's actually the reason why it's over 2 car lengths. So they're actually very wide, which is one of the this is just a side note. We do have some flowers on all the different ends. That is going to be part of the project. We haven't been able to get the pavers, and we've talked about remembering Diane with that. So I wanted to note that for everyone here, that's definitely something that's been discussed, that they will remain, and DGS is committed to continuing that and making that an important part of the project. So.
We need to dress that up a little bit. It's the gateway to the street on both ends. And again, Diane was a great lady, so to dedicate it to her is a wonderful idea. I just want to reiterate again, okay? Any questions, any concerns that you have, please do the survey. Even if you've given your ideas here, I would still say do the survey. There's spots to put your information in there. make sure that you're heard and it's on the record. We've taken a lot of notes here, and we're going to take everything into consideration, everything everybody said, and look at it. But please do the survey. If you have any additional, you think of anything, there is an online form there. Just fill it out. It'll go to somebody. It doesn't have to be a question. Let it be a thought, and then we just won't respond to you. But at least you'll know that we got it and we heard. Okay? I want to thank everybody for coming out. I think it was a good exchange of ideas and thoughts. Again, we all care about the same thing. Albany's our home. We love it, and we want to see the best, the best we can make it. And I think this plan and all the changes we've talked about, and the final plan, I think will be that. So thank you very much for coming.
Also, if you haven't had the chance, please sign in so that we can include you on any updates on the plan going forward.